Welcome to Behind the Book. It's time now for Behind the Book, hosted by Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion, two authors with a passion for books, no filters, and limitless curiosity. Join them now to find out the real story behind your favorite books and authors. And now, Behind the Book.
To another episode of Behind the Book. Today we have a special treat. Karen, the famous Karen McQuestion, #1 Amazon seller, is going to talk about the journey of Moonlight Child from really sort of not sure what you were going to do with it book to #1 on Amazon for weeks and weeks and weeks. So I'm excited for this one.
Well, when you suggested that we do this as a topic for the podcast, I said, I don't know, let me think about this, because it did phenomenally well. And as a book that I've written, I'm proud of it. But then part of me is like, I don't want to seem braggy. I don't know if that's a me thing or a Midwestern thing or whatever. Or is it being a woman of a certain age?
Right.
Because Mark Dawson does whole podcasts titled My $1 Million Year. And people are like, good for you. But it seems like if women brag, it's like, who does she think she is? I mean, you and I talked about it, how this is like encouraging to people that are starting out or are 15 books in and they're just getting, some success.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I've talked about it before in the podcast, but you and Pamela Kelly, we're all personal friends, and her sort of walking us through her process, how she thinks about it and ads and this and that. And then seeing you sort of doing the same thing, I was like, gosh, maybe I could do this. Maybe it isn't just like if something goes viral on social media, maybe there is something I could actually do that would make a difference. And it's all worked. So that's one of the reasons I thought it would be really helpful for people to hear just sort of what did you do? How did you think about it?
And it's interesting you say, how did you think about it? Because that plays such a big role in it. It's, people could almost like take notes and say, okay, she did X, Y, and Z, but there's so much more to it. It's more of a mindset almost. Yeah. So to start at the beginning, I started out in self-publishing, one of the first to upload to Kindle in 2009. And then I signed on with Amazon Publishing and did a number of books through them for years, like 10 years. And throughout that time, occasionally I would still self-publish if it was a book they weren't super excited about, or if I just wanted to get it out quickly or whatever. During that time, there was a change in staff. So my old editor retired and I got a new editor, a lovely woman. This is not about trashing anyone, but very often in publishing, when you get a new editor, they aren't as enthused about the authors that were brought on board by the previous regime. I mean, it's like somebody else picking out your clothes. They could be great clothes, but maybe they're not for you. So I had sensed that the enthusiasm for my books was not quite at the same level. Super nice, can't complain, but it was just there. And not only that, but some of the older authors were not getting renewed. So their new books were not getting. So I knew this was a possibility, but I wrote The Moonlight Child. My previous book with them, Dovetail, was in the top 100 Kindle at that point still. So I was fairly sure that they would want it because my way of thinking, it made perfect business sense. However, I was wrong. So I submitted it. This was the beginning of June 2020, just to give you a time frame.
Yeah.
And
good.
So I submitted it. She didn't get back to me right away, which should have been my first clue. And people say, sorry, my email's backed up. But part of me always thinks, yeah, but I bet if Stephen King emailed you, suddenly your response time might have been a little different, but okay. So she read it and she said, the first line, I have the email right in front of me. Thanks for your patience while I read your new manuscript, which, I mean, she doesn't know me at all because there was no patience involved. But so she went on to say some really nice things about the story. I won't bore you with the details. But then this is the line that said, no, thank you. We are evolving as a publisher and are being asked to meet some very specific goals, which have me passing on this opportunity. So that's, sort of a generic, nice, no thank you. And I'll let you move forward with this one on your own. She hopes for my continued success, et cetera, and so on. So even though it was as nice as can be, and I love self-publishing, there was some small part of me that was like, you didn't want my book?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Well, I was offended on your behalf because first of all, I'm a huge fan. I love your books. And Dovetail was my absolute favorite. And that's saying a lot because I love all of them. But I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, what? Why would they not want this book that's so ridiculous? But anyway.
well, so anyway, so at that point, I was free to do what I wanted with it. So I did wind up self-publishing it in September. So I mean, I had within a very short period of time, I had early readers go through it. I made changes. There's a good friend of mine. Her name is Barbara Taylor Sissel, who is a terrific novelist, but she also is a really good story editor. So she went over it for me as a personal favor. She actually does it for a living now too. So if anyone wants to hire Barbara,
Oh, that's
I can
interesting. I didn't know
recommend her.
that.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
she's so good. She's so great about honoring your voice and your story, but just pointing out things. And she also makes suggestions. Like you could, I noticed this, but if you wanted to, you could do that, and that would easily fix it. So I love that.
Interesting. Yeah.
So and then I put it through the editor and I got a good cover. I'm crazy about categories and keywords. So if you follow Dave Chesson, who's the Kindlepreneur, he's got some really excellent YouTube videos. And all you have to do is Google his name and categories, and you'll see why I think that's really important to maximize categories. So I set it up in what I thought to do well. But then the other thing I did, which I hadn't really done with previous books, and I didn't even tell you this, Tess, so this is new. And this is kind of goes along with something you and I have talked about before, which is visualizing what you want. Now, you've talked to me about like the concept of having a vision board. And I always believed in that. In fact, a friend, and you know her too, Kate Danley, we keep in touch. And at the beginning of every year, she says, so let's write out what goals we want to achieve this year. And the first time she did it, this was several years ago, I was like, oh, I hate this kind of thing. I'm like, I just don't make New Year's resolutions. I just don't. But I was like, oh, okay. So I wrote out like, I want to write this book. I want to like learn how to do this formatting software. I want to learn how Amazon ads work, whatever my goals were. I would write it in an email to her and she'd write it in an email to me. And then at the end of the year, she'd say, hey, let's see how we did. Darned if I didn't do all of the things I listed, even if I thought they were like long shots. And I've come to find out that there's actual studies that say you're more likely to hit a mark for a goal if you actually write it down.
Yeah, and I have this thing where it stuck with me. It was something that Oprah said one time. I used to listen to her radio shows, and she said the most important thing is figuring out what you want. That's what keeps most people back. Is they're like, well, I want to be happy. Well, what does that mean? Or I want to be rich. But the more specific you can be, then okay, who knows how it works? Like, is it the universe, God? Or is it just yourself knowing, oh, okay, now I know what I want, so I'm going to do X, Y, Z to get it. So yeah, I'm a huge believer, as you know, in all of that.
So with that in mind, I started thinking, what do I want for this book? And I have to admit, there was a little bit of kind of, you don't want the book? I'll show you what you missed out on. I was calling it my spite book for a little while, but then I decided I didn't have room for that kind of negativity. So I just let that go. And I didn't even consciously decide to do this, but before I would lay in bed at night, right before I fell asleep, I would start visualizing what I wanted for this book. I could actually see the Amazon page that had the top 100 books and see it in the top slot. I could see people recommending it on Facebook. I could see like everything foreign rights being sold. And I could see somebody wanting to make it into a movie. And it became something that I kind of looked forward to before I fell asleep, like visualizing. And like I said, it wasn't anything that I thought I'm going to put this into play and do. It just was a natural kind of desire. And it didn't happen right away that the book started to do well. It got good reviews and people liked it, but it wasn't until the third or fourth month that it was out that it really took off. But to backtrack to what we were talking about with the visualizing, Have you ever heard of a woman named Helen Hadsel? It looks like it's spelled Helene, but I believe it's pronounced Helen. She's had this philosophy and she's since deceased, but she was known as the woman who always won every contest. And
Mm.
she was a big power of positive thinking
Mhm.
proponent. She did talks on it and everything. And so she had this formula she called SPEC, which is the S stands for select it, then the P project it, E expect it, and C collect it. And she said, you have to believe with complete certainty that what you're projecting will come to pass. And I read about this after The Moonlight Child took off, and I realized exactly what she was talking about was what I had done. And she also
Mm.
was a big proponent on doing it right before you fall asleep, which I had never read that anywhere else. So that just kind of confirmed. I don't know if it burrows into your subconscious more with that kind of timing, or if you're putting it out into the universe. I have no idea,
Mm.
honestly. I'm very open-minded, which, people might say gullible, but I'm very open-minded and anything's possible. And one other thing she said is, there is no failure, only delay in results.
Mm.
So I kept expecting it. And so when it went into the top 100, I was like, oh, okay, good. Now we're on our way. And people started really liking the book, which that's, as you know, that's everything. I mean, it's nice to have sales, but if you had the same amount of sales with a book people hated, it would not have the same feeling to the author. It would still feel like a failure. It doesn't matter how much money you make or how well it does. It has to be something that people are enjoying. So to get back to what you were talking about before with the actual nuts and bolts kinds of things that I did, for the first time, I started spending a lot of money on advertising. And I've always been a believer in advertising. People can't read a book they don't know about. And I heard somebody somewhere say Coca-Cola is a known brand around the world. They still advertise. So as long as the money you're paying in advertising is, what do they call that test?
A return on investment.
Return on
Yeah.
investment. You have to
Yeah.
watch that because you can't spend all your money on advertising and have zero profit. Someone who had first talked about this with us was Pamela Kelly, who had said she had started doing it. And it was almost to the point where you do it to a certain extent, and then you're like, wow, this is doing well. What if I turn the knob and up the ad spend, which is what I did. And if the difference between the sales and the ad spend percentage-wise, it worked, that I came out ahead, I just kept doing it. Amazon ads and Facebook ads, I did both. Along with that, I had a review group, which I inherited from you primarily, about 50 readers who liked my work and read the book before it came out and were really instrumental in going online and recommending it. So I would say those were my primary ways of
Mhm.
promoting it.
Yeah, I had a question, kind of a nuts and bolts. When you said you decided on the keywords, can you walk us through how you did that? Like, pretend like I don't know anything, just because some people might not really know that. That's something I didn't know.
You're talking about keywords, or are you talking about
Yeah.
categories?
I'm talking about keywords, but categories same, I suppose, if you want to delve into both those.
Well, as I said before, Dave Chesson from the Kindlepreneur can explain it far better than I can, but I'll give you a little brief bit. KDP, which is the distributor for self-published books on Amazon, allows you to pick a certain number of keywords and categories. And the categories, to me, you shouldn't pick them with a mind just that they match the book. You want categories that match the book and are also advantageous. It's become like a strategy for me. So category might be romance, but then it might be clean and wholesome romance. And then because it will break down into subsets. And the greater the number of subsets, generally speaking, the greater your chances are of making it into the top 100 in that sub category. So you could be at 40,000 ranking overall, but be in the top 100 in this sub category. And so some people will say, well, big deal. Who even looks at those lists? And they might be right. I don't know that there are people that select books by looking at this kind of funnel down list. But what happens is, and this is part speculation, part things that I've heard from other people who I think are also speculating, is that the system, the algorithms that we all talk about all the time. They like books that are in the top 100. They start to see, oh, okay, this book is doing well, even in these sub categories. And so it gets elevated in the searches. And eventually, all of this combined helps the book, assuming it's a good book. So
Mhm.
what I was told a long time ago by somebody at Amazon when I first started writing for Amazon Publishing is the algorithms take into account everything. They take into account how many people click on your page, how long they stay on your page, if you look inside the book, if you download the book, if you read the book and then go on to read another book by the same author. So they have all this data, and part of the data is how well it's doing in the categories.
So tell us a little bit, like what helps you decide which 10 categories to choose? Because I struggle with that because I'm like, well, it could fit in this, but that's more competitive than this other category. Like, how do you weigh that out?
I think that you want a category that's, for instance, if you write romance, if you pick romance that winnows down to all these other subgenres, you can still be in the top 100 in romance. So say it's now I wish I had this in front of me because now I'm just speaking off the cuff. But so you have romance, and then it's clean and wholesome romance, and clean and wholesome romance, inspirational.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can be on the top 100 inspirational and top 100 clean and romance and top 100 romance.
Right.
So you're basically putting the book into 3 categories. Of course, you'll have to rank better to be in romance than in
Right.
inspirational.
Right. Well, I heard this and I never have been able to find out if it's true for sure, but I'm pretty sure David Cochran said that, like, let's just say I'll use my historicals, for example. So they're historical romance, and then they go down to the category American historical, which is a
Mhm.
less competitive category. So that's great for me. He said that if you put it in one of the sub categories, that's part of, like, let's just say it goes up to the historical romance. Does it automatically? Do you automatically get 3 categories out of that? Is that am
That's
I?
the way it's worked for me.
Okay. All right. That's what I thought. And I always wonder if that's true because it's hard to know sometimes, because if you aren't ranking in the top 100 on a more competitive, then you're like, well, is it in there or not?
So I am crazy about categories. I think it's something people don't talk about enough, because there are, I don't know how many thousands of them. So it's not like somebody's going to take your spot. Although I did notice that you took my spot one time with this historical romance. I was like, darn it, Tess. But it's okay because, you're a friend. It's all right. Um, but anyway, so, people that don't use categories to their
Mhm,
advantage, I don't understand it because it's free and it's easy and
mhm,
you can do it
mhm.
once, and you can, if you notice that something isn't beneficial for you, you can contact KDP and say, I want it taken out of this category and put into this category. Now, I would advise people not to use a category that doesn't apply to your book just
Yeah,
because you have a good chance of making the top 100, because that's a good way to A, mess up the algorithms, which will ultimately hurt you, and B, alienate readers
yeah,
and who will give you
it-
bad reviews, which will
yeah,
also mess up your algorithms. It's
yeah,
just not to your advantage.
yeah.
Um,
If they're expecting a different type of book, that really annoys them. Yeah, and I like what you said because I don't know if this has ever really clicked for me that if you're ranking well in one of the subcategories, that the algorithm then rewards you for that. So even if you're not in the top 100, if you're in the, let's say, the top 1,000 of the store, then that's beneficial. So yeah, that's good. I'm glad that you explained that.
and you can be in the top 100 in categories even if you're at 40,000 or 50,000. There are
Yeah, absolutely.
sub
Yeah.
categories. I mean, it might be a little difficult to find, but I'm so obsessed with it that I geek out if I find a new category because they're always changing them. Because
Hmm.
if there's a new category, a lot of people aren't in them, and it's possible to make it without ranking really well. So, I mean, I always say if there's a system, there's a way you can game the system to your advantage, and
Hmm.
don't use it to try to trick readers, but use it to get visibility for your book. I think that's perfectly fine.
Can you share what the website is that you can look up your categories?
I
I
sure can, and I
yeah,
love this guy.
yeah.
So I always when I order from Amazon, I always do it through his affiliate link, so he gets a little money back, but it's
Oh, I didn't even know you could do that.
yeah. So,
I will start doing that too.
it's, if you would Google BK, like B, K as in book links, and then a space and then categories, it'll come right up. I'll put the links in our show notes as
Okay,
well, so
perfect.
people
Yeah,
go right to it. Because
yeah.
it's interesting to me that if you find somebody who maybe has a book like yours and you want to see what categories they picked, you can check by looking it up on this site. All you need is the ASIN for the book and it will reveal all. So you can see, even if you're with a publisher, you can see what categories they selected for you.
Yeah, and sometimes Amazon will add you into categories that you don't request, and sometimes that's good because it means you'll get 13 categories instead of 10, but
Mhm.
sometimes they put it in the wrong one. Like I
Mhm.
had something in sports romance for a while and the hero had played professional sports, but it really didn't fit in that genre, so that's an example of one where you would have to contact Amazon and ask them to take it out.
And then you had mentioned keywords, and that's a little trickier. I don't have as good of a handle on keywords as I do on categories.
Mhm.
What I usually do is go into the search bar for Amazon and see what people are searching for. So you start to type,
Mm.
say you write domestic suspense. You might start to type domestic suspense, and then a couple things will pop up, and it'll say domestic suspense for women, or domestic suspense kidnapping, or domestic suspense. And then you click on whatever's appropriate and see where your book would fall. If there's like 8,000 responses to that keyword, that's maybe not a good one for you, even though that's what people are looking for. I mean, it doesn't hurt to use that. And the keywords, now they give you 7 opportunities to use keywords, but it's not just one word or one phrase. It's up to so many letters. And I don't know off the top of my head, 25?
How
Does that
many?
sound right?
Yeah, that
But
sounds about right.
if you
Yeah,
put
it'll
in
cut you off
so
when
you
you get
so
to
you could put
it.
you could put domestic suspense kidnapping women, and if it allows that many number, then you're gonna have that allowed
Yeah,
for
and
you.
you wanna fill those little lines up as fat as you can because it doesn't have to be anything even sensical, like, you just put the commas between the words or whatever. Um, and the other thing to keep in mind, and correct me if I have this mixed up, but my understanding is that if you have something in your blurb, like let's just say small town romance for me, if it's in your blurb, then you should not put it in your keywords
Now
because it's already being counted, right?
you're talking about the description of the book?
Yes.
I have heard that as well, and I don't know if that's true or not.
If
Yes,
somebody knows, please email us.
yes, we
But yeah, I thought I heard that, from Chesson or, one of these guys who knows all these things. Yeah, so like if you're wanting to maximize your keywords, then if you have stuff already either in your title or your subtitle or your description, you're good. And then you can choose all, many, many more to fill in those keyword boxes.
and as I said, it has to be apropos to the book and something that people are looking for. Now, for my kids' books, if I would write something like I had a story called Celia and the Fairies, which is a middle grade novel. Middle grade novel is something people commonly use, but if you write fairy books, it'll come up like for girls ages 7 through 11. So that literally is a keyword for that book because that's what people are looking for. And so when people are searching for that, then my book will come up among many, many others. But so that's just something to keep in mind.
What do you think about also bots and like what are some good strategies to get with the right crowd?
In my opinion, and take it for what it's worth, I could be completely wrong. I don't know that also bots are as important as they used to be.
Mm.
Amazon has minimized their visibility on the page. And to really be important, so say my books would appeal to the readers of Kristen Hanna. The fact that Kristen Hanna is among my also bots doesn't really help Kristen Hanna. She's already this worldwide phenomenon, #1 New York Times bestseller. What I would love is for my books to show up on her page. And that's not going to happen. So, what I do like to look at is when you look on a book page or you look on an author page, it'll say show other authors that readers of this author purchase. So they'll have, I don't know,
Mhm.
6 or 8. And when I advertise on Facebook, I will target the readers of those authors because we have overlap readers and people seem to enjoy their books as well as my books.
Well, and that I think like another thing people throw around a lot is like newsletter swaps. And at first I was like, well, what does that even mean? But that is another strategy to get in the right crowd is to, find people who do write similar types of books and say, hey, do you want to be in my newsletter? If, you put, as an exchange. And I think that's another way, to kind of try to, because as again, the algorithms, these mysterious algorithms are playing with all of this information at once to try to show your book to the right reader, because that's what Amazon wants. That's their whole strategy as a business is we want to show the customer exactly what they want before they even knew they wanted it.
Is that something you've done? Is the newsletter swaps? Because I've never done that.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, I would, I mean, especially if you're, just starting out and you're trying to grow your newsletter, that's a great way to do it. If you can find somebody who, maybe has more subscribers than you and is still willing to do it, don't be a jerk and just start spamming people you don't know. Like, hey, I said we're in the same category, and they're like a huge New York Times bestseller, and you're brand new. Like, don't do that, because like you don't want to be that person. But if you can find people who are maybe even in kind of your sort of level, either experience wise or number of books or rankings or whatever, and just say, hey, are you willing to do this? And that's another great reason to go to conferences and to be in author Facebook groups and stuff to, just start getting to know people. Because that's how I met you, was just through, a Facebook group. And we're like, doing this podcast now. We're best friends.
Oh, sure. Yes.
In my mind, we're best friends.
I think we're best friends. I'm proud to claim you. So
yeah,
can we talk about Facebook ads?
Yes, please do.
Someone had said, and again, I wish I could remember who this was, said that Facebook ads are most effective for books that are discounted or free, whereas Amazon ads work well for full price books because people are looking for books on Amazon. Now, I do think that that is true, but if you're in Kindle Unlimited, which is the subscriber service through Amazon where you pay $9.99 a month and it's like Netflix for books, and you feature that on your Facebook ad prominently, free in Kindle Unlimited, you can get the same kind of results or close. And especially if you're targeting people in Kindle Unlimited.
Right.
So what I was doing originally was Facebook ads with just like a still image, and they weren't doing well. But I've tried different things. Now I use little video clips that are like less than 15 seconds long, and Facebook lets you upload them and they let you put text over. So you can also add sound, but a lot of times people don't like that. So for instance, for the Moonlight Child, which is about a woman who notices something strange going on at the neighbors, I found a video clip of a woman looking out her window with binoculars, and the text was something really simple, something like, you wouldn't believe what's happening next door. And that little bit of intrigue and that little short video clip has served me well. It seems like that's enough for people to go, oh, okay, well, what's this all about? And they click on it and they look at the book. So if you can find a video clip and something really hooky, I think that helps. I also, for a while, ran an ad through Facebook, which had the whole first chapter of the book ending on a little like cliffhanger and, want to read more, and then the link. And that one did really well for a long time too. Now, these ads only do well for so long. Sometimes it's months. One of them I got like over a year worth of play. And then Facebook will tell you that I just got a little pop-up today, and I had never seen it before, saying it's losing its whatever you call it, effectiveness. So just keep an eye on it. If your click-through rate starts going up, somebody said it should be, I think it was in the Sky Warren class, Facebook class. She said if it's under 20 cents a click, that can still be effective. If it starts creeping up, then you might want to kill the ad if it starts hemorrhaging money for you.
Right. Well, that's another thing I think we should bring up is, there are so many resources out there to learn how to do this stuff. And some of them are classes you have to pay for, but some are just like free videos. David Cochran has an entire series on starting from scratch, first for your first book or whatever. So the resources are definitely there. You can learn this stuff. I think a lot of it sometimes is trial and error. I mean, I tried a lot of ads that didn't work. I mean, you have to keep playing around with it.
Oh, and it's heartbreaking when it doesn't work. You're like,
Yes, it is.
I am spending, it's like, and you try not to add it up because you're like, oh, I'm spending all this money. And I feel like I'm taking food out of my family's mouths, which I'm really not.
Yeah.
And Amazon ads, it's different because with Facebook ads, you pay a certain amount per day, whereas Amazon ads, you pay for the click-throughs up to a certain amount. So you say, I'm
Yeah.
willing to pay $10 a day for this ad. Well, you might only spend, $1.50 if no one clicks on the ad.
Yeah, the Amazon, what I hear from a lot of people is I can't get them to spend. What is your strategy for getting them to spend?
I actually took the Brian Cohen course for
Mhm.
free, and
As
he
did I, yeah.
offers it every 3 months, and he
Mhm.
does an excellent job of showing how to set up an ad and what the different ads are and what they do. So if you're completely clueless, that's a really great resource. And you can take another course with him that explains it in more detail, and then that one you would pay for. What I do is I start with a really low bid, and then nothing happens. So
Mhm.
then I keep increasing it by a nickel, a really small amount, which is maybe why the Moonlight Child didn't start doing well until the third or fourth month.
Yeah,
Because
when you really started upping the bids.
yes,
Yeah.
then I would start upping the bids, and then I was like, okay, now I'm getting some play. Am I getting are these click-throughs converting into actual sales, or is it just people that are taking a look?
Right.
And that's something when you're in Kindle Unlimited, you can't tell right away because somebody might click on the ad, look at the book, decide, oh, okay, it's in Kindle Unlimited. I have Kindle Unlimited. They might add
Borrow it,
it,
but not read it.
but
Yeah,
not read
for a
it,
little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
for days or weeks or even months. And so it's sort of a leap of faith if you see that you're getting the click throughs, but you aren't seeing the immediate payoff. You go, okay, well, I'm just going to wait a little bit and see how this plays out completely.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'll just throw in the other strategy that I've used because I have longer series is I have my books in KU now, but before I always had a perma free of the first book. And so I was doing advertising on free books, and then you can't look obviously at the actual ROI on that ad. You have to look at the read through, numbers and is this setting the people up to buy the rest of the series and that sort of thing. So, I mean, everybody has to look at their own circumstances, sort of what it is that they're trying to do. The other thing I just wanted to mention, because you said, well, as long as you're not losing money, breaking even, I agree totally. But also, one thing that I sort of looked at, this is say 3 years ago, I was like, I'm basically investing in finding new readers. And so if I only make 5% over what I've spent, that was okay for me because I had a
Mhm.
long-term strategy. Whereas if you are just really trying to kill it with one book, then you would think about it differently.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because when the new book does well, for me, because I write standalone titles, I can see the backlist getting lifted because then people are like, oh, okay, I really enjoyed this. What
Mhm.
else does she have? And oh,
Yeah.
they're also in Kindle Unlimited. Or if they're buying them, they're affordable. They're not $14.99 for a Kindle book, which I still don't know why traditional publishers do that. I mean,
Yeah.
but anyway, yeah, so absolutely. I agree with
Yeah.
you.
All right. I have two follow-up questions for you. One is I want you to talk a little bit about book descriptions because I think you're excellent at them. So I'd love for you to share some tips.
Book descriptions are something I absolutely love to write, and a lot of people don't. When I first started out self-publishing in Kindle, I made a study of it, like what works, what doesn't. And then one day I realized what the most effective ones did. I mean, I thought there has to be some commonalities. So if you look on my website, if anyone's that interested, there's a page that says for writers. I do have what I'm just about to say, but in more detail. I took Harry Potter, the original description, and the Da Vinci Code, the original description. And I noticed that each of them started out by talking about the main character and what their current situation was, who they were. So Harry Potter is living with his horrible aunt and uncle who make him sleep under the stairs, and he's bullied by his cousin or whatever. I don't have it in front of me, so I'm just paraphrasing. And then an owl comes and delivers a message that says, blah, blah, blah. So that's the second part of the blurb. That's what has changed. And with the Da Vinci Code, it's his name Robert Langdon. He's this expert in such and such and such. And then what changes? After that, they don't really tell you too much. There's a lot of like alluding to some mysterious things. And then it usually ends with some hype. In one case, it was the awards won. It's kind of more promotional. Like, you'll have a jaw-dropping twist at the end or something that will make people go, oh, okay.
Sounds really good. Yeah.
It sounds really good. It's got this, this, and this. So you, of course, can write a book description or blurb using a different formula than that. And sometimes you have to, because sometimes it's not a one character arc. Sometimes if it's an ensemble cast, you might have to structure it differently. But that's a really good thing to keep in mind. What do they call it in the writer's journey? This is the normal world. This is the happening that changed or upset things. And then this is what happened from there. But you don't spell it all out because you want the reader to buy the book and find out.
Right.
It's a lot of smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, no, I love this. This is great. And I love when there's a formula, even if you have to tweak it, for whatever reason. It's great to have some framework. Okay. The other thing I want to ask you about is, and I have some opinions about this myself, but what do you put in your back matter? So what do you have a call to action at the end, even though I know you do standalones, but just curious about that.
I'm very inconsistent. I probably do not use my back matter to my best advantage. I do direct people to my website if you want to sign up for my newsletter to find out about new releases, blah, blah, blah. I do that. And then I usually direct them to another book or two. If you enjoyed this, you might enjoy blah, blah, blah. And then I include the book cover because I think visuals are really important. And I used to put the entire description, which is like 3 paragraphs. And I stopped doing that because someone smarter than me said, it's better to say what it is than go into description. So if it's a time traveling romance, that's all you have to say. Or if it's a heartwarming family drama, whatever. And then that way you can fit more books in. If you have a big block of text below the cover and the link, then people get, reader fatigue. They've already finished reading your book. They want to go on to another one. Just catch them while their interest is still there.
Yeah. And the rule that I have always heard, well, not always, but the rule that I've heard recently is don't give them more than 2 things to do. So here's the next book that you're going to want to read from me, and here's why, very brief, like you said, and then join my newsletter or join my Facebook group or whatever. And that because if you give them too many things to do, then they get kind of like, oh, I'll do those things later, including buying the next book. So I think that's, and I definitely noticed an uptick when I changed the back matter out because I was doing the full chapter of the next book because the series, thinking that would, and I don't know why this is, but it is true that it sells less books that way. I don't know why. It's strange to me. But.
It does make you wonder, is it overwhelming or is it,
Or maybe they're just like, I know I want this. I'm just going to order it right now, but now I don't know where the link is. And there's this first chapter and I'm confused. People are easily confused like myself.
And why unnecessarily complicate it? They either are on board or they're not. It's not like they aren't, so I think that's good.
All right. Well, that's great. And we're kind of running into the kind of 45 minutes, so we probably should stop. But I'm sure we'll have a follow-up. If anybody has questions, let us know. And
absolutely. Oh, and to tell you the end of the story with the Moonlight child.
Oh, yeah.
It did sell. And I kept getting emails from people who wanted to know if have you sold the foreign rights for Vietnam? Have you sold the foreign rights for whatever? And I finally contacted a foreign rights agent who was able to even sell even more than the few that had contacted me. This has never happened. I have sold foreign rights before, but not to this extent. So it was literally mind blowing. And the book made it all the way to #1 in Kindle. And it was #3 for that year for the entire store.
Which is
for the whole year.
Incredible. So incredible. Yeah. Well, and I truly believe with every fiber of my being that it will be a movie. That call is coming. I know it is. I'm trying to brace myself for my jealousy, is because it's going to be there.
You're so kind. And that's another thing that this woman about positive thinking is like, not I hope or I wish. It's like there's certainty. There's no
Yeah.
failure, only delay in results. So
Yeah.
it could be 5
Yeah.
years from now or whatever, but
Mhm.
things will align. And by then I'll be on to the next book, I hope. But
Yeah.
be a
No,
nice
this is
surprise.
great. Well, okay. Well, thank you so much for this. I think people will really enjoy hearing. And again, if anybody has questions, let us know. And if anybody has suggestions for episodes that they would like to have us do, either people to interview, or if there's a subject you want Karen and I to tackle, we're happy to do that. You and I could talk about this stuff all day.
Oh, yeah, I love talking shop. And I love it when you can help other people out because so many people helped us out in the early
Absolutely.
days.
Absolutely.
And we're
Yeah,
not competing, the rising tide lifts all boats. I love it
that's
when
right.
I see other people do well.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah. And also it gives you the feeling of, oh, if they did it, then I can do it too. And I just got an email this morning on jealousy, and it was the mantra she was advising is people say to themselves, oh, that this great thing happened for that person. A lot of great things are happening for me too. So it's the same exact idea.
well, and two, you have to remember people that are doing really well, they didn't always do really well.
Right.
They started out right where you are. I've had books
Yeah.
that didn't take off. I've had books that people didn't universally love. I've been there, but
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that great things aren't there for you around the corner.
And I always tell the story. I know I've shared it on here before, but when my publisher went under, I was like, just sort of, oh my gosh, now I'm indie, I guess, and I don't know what I'm doing. And the first release I had, which was in 2017, and this is having been published since 2011 and having done pretty well, like with some of my earlier books. And I sold 4 copies on release day. And I can remember crying my eyes out that night, like sitting on the edge of the bed, and Cliff's like, honey, it's going to be okay. Like, you're just starting over and everything. And I'm not, number one in the store, but I'm doing very well. And so it is possible to overcome, and you just have to keep working at it and keep trying to figure out the puzzle.
And I think that's the difference between people that put out a book or 2 or 3 and they don't do well and people that just keep going. People I know, I've given talks and people invariably say, in the first 10 years that I did this, there was no self-publishing on Kindle. And I just kept writing books that nobody wanted to publish and agents couldn't sell. And someone said, well, what made you keep going? And I'm like, I don't know if I was delusional or just driven, but I was determined to make this work.
Yeah.
And think about it. Think of all the books that are out there. Somebody somewhere started out with just an idea and some drive. Right?
Absolutely. Well, and I did one of the roundtables at RAM last year, and it was kind of like, what do you do with the things that you learn at this conference? Like, kind of how do you plan out your thing? And somebody asked me, well, like, how do you keep going when it's so discouraging when you do sell 4 books or whatever? And what I have always done is go back to why you were doing it in the first place, which is you love to write. You love to tell these stories. They're inside of you. They want out. And just focus on writing the very best book you can. And then, implementing some of these business ideas that you learn along the way. And
Look for
things
the
will
joy.
fall into place. Yes. Yes.
Another thing that's helps is even if you only have 2 reviews, if they're good reviews, just keep reading them.
Yes.
Because those 2 readers love the book and they are not atypical. There are other readers out there, they just don't know about your book yet.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for doing this. This was awesome. And I hope you guys enjoy it. And we'll see you guys next Monday.
Thank you for listening to Behind the Book, brought to you by authors Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion. They hope you found it entertaining and informative. If you loved it, tell your friends. And if you have a moment, they'd love for you to post a star rating or review. This has been Behind the Book.